In the middle of the afternoon on June 30th, a knock came at the captain's door. It was the chief deck officer. He'd seen something far off, about 2 miles away on the starboard side. A faint shape bobbing in the vast expanse of the ocean. The captain wasted no time. He gave the order to turn the ship around. As they drew nearer, the mysterious object slowly transformed into a discernible shape. 2 vessels, tied together, drifting aimlessly. And then they saw them, the bodies. First one, then another. Lifeless forms, barely recognizable as human. The closer they came, the more the details took shape. There they were, a man and a woman. Their faces gaunt, their bodies skeletal. The man's beard was thick, unruly, almost obscuring his sharp, sunken cheeks. The woman, her legs thin like the bare branches of a winter tree, had hair that was ragged and long, matted by the salt and wind. Their clothes hung in tatters, mere remnants of fabric. Skin clung tightly to bone, and their eyes, dark, hollow, fixed on the ship as if it might disappear in an instant. On a wet November day in 1966, Maralyn turned to Maurice and said the words that would change their lives forever. "Suppose we sell the house, buy a yacht, and live aboard." It was the kind of suggestion that most people would laugh off. Something absurd, impossible even. But not for them. Maurice Bailey, just 33 at the time, worked as a compositor at a printing firm in Derby. Maralyn, 8 years younger, held a job at the city's tax office. Together, they had built a comfortable life, a modest bungalow with a vegetable patch, all the modern conveniences, weekends spent pursuing their outdoor passions. They had just managed to buy their home. But comfort can be deceptive. There was something gnawing at them, a restlessness that neither could ignore. Maurice called it suburban domestic stress, that silent ache of boredom that comes when life becomes too predictable. And so, a wild idea began to take shape. An idea that seemed at first like nothing more than a dream, slowly began to feel attainable. We could sail to New Zealand, they mused, letting the thought take root. The Canaries, the Caribbean, the Galapagos, places they had only ever read about, but they could make it real. Their dream took a tangible step forward when they commissioned a boatyard in Plymouth to build their vessel. A 31-foot Bermuda sloop with a single mast crafted to their specifications. But no radios, no modern electronics, just the essentials. Maurice wanted to rely on the stars as sailors had done for centuries. This was their adventure, an escape from the modern world. He imagined himself like Columbus or Cook, navigating by the constellations, needing no one but Maralyn by his side. People said they were mad. But Maurice had a quiet confidence in their plan. He and Maralyn were different. Maralyn lively and outgoing. Maurice more reserved, introspective. And yet their partnership worked. Their bond, like their boat, was built to weather the storms. They named the vessel Maralyn, a blend of their names. For years they thought of little else. They sold their house, moved into a small flat in Southampton, and took new jobs to fund their voyage. With friends, they practiced their sailing along the south coast, making trips across the Channel to Normandy. Maurice was the captain, navigator, and mechanic. Maralyn ran the galley and managed their stores. Together they learned the ways of the sea, how to handle bad weather, how to live with broken sleep, how to cope with seasickness that could leave them incapacitated for days, and solitude. Crossing oceans, they would be alone, perhaps seeing only one ship a month. They set sail in June of 1972 from Southampton. Their journey took them to Spain, Portugal, Madeira, the Canary Islands. From there, they crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, visiting the islands of the Caribbean before reaching Panama. They crossed the canal and stood on the threshold of the Pacific. On a calm morning, as dawn broke, Maralyn gazed out at the vast emptiness before them, a clear sky above, the boundless Pacific below. They were a small boat sailing into a great unknown. She finished her watch and went below deck, where Maurice was still asleep. Mornings on the sea followed a certain rhythm: coffee, breakfast, and the endless checks and chores demanded by life on a boat. But that morning on the 4th of March, 1973, 7 days into their journey across the Pacific, something was different. Just as Maralyn reached out to wake Maurice, a sudden crack shattered the air. A jolt, violent like the sound of a gunshot, threw them from their routine. They rushed on deck to find a scene of chaos. Beside their boat, a massive whale, 40 feet long at least, thrashed in agony. Water cascaded down its dark body as it writhed in the ocean, its tail slamming the water with a fury that sent waves crashing against Maralyn. Blood poured from wounds on the creature's side. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the whale disappeared into the depths of the ocean. But the damage had been done. Below deck, water surged through the boat. Maurice and Maralyn worked frantically. There was a hole, gaping and relentless, near the galley, below the waterline. They tried everything, but the sea was relentless. Maralyn pumped water with all her strength, while Maurice searched for solutions. They stuffed clothes, cushions, anything they could find into the hole, but nothing worked. The water kept rising. There was no stopping it. Realizing the boat was sinking, they exchanged a look that held all the fear and determination of those who face the impossible. They climbed into their inflatable dinghy and life raft, gathered what few possessions they could salvage: some fresh water containers, a gas canister, a stove, a compass, a camera, and Maralyn's diary. They worked fast, silent, and focused as the water rose around them. As Maralyn slipped beneath the waves, they were left alone. Adrift. The vast Pacific stretched endlessly around them. Maurice knew where they were, roughly 250 miles north of Ecuador, about 300 miles east of the Galapagos. They were close to a shipping lane, but too far north to be carried west by the current. "We'll have to row at night," Maralyn said. In the searing heat of day, it would be impossible. And so, as darkness fell, they began. 2-hour shifts, one rowing, one resting. They rowed through the night, guiding themselves by the stars. Thirst became their constant companion. They doubled their water ration, but it barely helped. Maurice took a morning sight with his sextant, eager to see their progress. They had rowed just over 4 miles south. 4 more nights passed, 4 more nights of rowing. Blisters covered their hands, their bodies weakened. Each stroke of the oars sapped more of their strength. Then, at noon on March 9th, Maurice took another sight. 10 miles gained, but it wasn't enough. The current was carrying them west faster than they could row south. They would never reach the islands. They had to stop, conserve their energy, conserve their water, hope for a ship. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The ocean grew wild once again. Waves crashed, thunder rumbled, lightning cracked the sky. It was as if the very sea itself had turned against them. Early on March 12th, Maralyn spotted something on the horizon, a ship heading east, about a mile away. Their hearts raced. Could this be their salvation? But when Maurice tried to light their flares, nothing happened. One after another, the flares failed. The ship passed by, oblivious. The helplessness was crushing. So close to people, so close to safety, and yet so far. Days passed, their strength waning. Turtles began circling their raft. At first, it was a welcome distraction, watching these creatures swim and play. But then the turtles began bumping against the raft. Their hard shells could easily puncture the fragile rubber. "What if we killed one and ate it?" Maralyn suggested. Neither of them wanted to take a life, but their situation was desperate. They caught the next turtle that came too close. Maurice knocked it out quickly, sparing it any suffering. They cooked the meat over their small stove. It wasn't much, but it was something. They used turtle meat as bait to fish, fashioning hooks from safety pins. They caught silver herring, which they ate raw, sucking moisture from the flesh to stave off dehydration. Then the rain came. Rain at last, precious water from the sky. They filled their bottles, rejoicing as the cool liquid replenished their parched bodies. But the rain was relentless, heavy, and violent. It flooded the raft, soaking everything. Still, it was a gift. By late March, their supplies had dwindled. The last piece of Dundee cake was gone. Maurice's body was little more than skin and bone. In the dark before dawn on March 29th, Maralyn was on watch. She saw it, another ship, lights on the horizon. They tried their flares again. This time they worked. But the ship sailed on. The second ship in 25 days. And it passed them by. A third came 2 weeks later. Then a fourth, fifth, and sixth. Each one sailed past without noticing them. Maurice had given up hope. But Maralyn, she still believed. She believed they would survive. She had to. She kept him going. They read aloud to each other, played games with makeshift dominoes and paper playing cards, anything to keep their minds sharp. On May 18th, Maurice spotted a huge white cargo ship approaching. The lucky seventh, they thought. They waved, shouted until their voices were hoarse. But again, the ship sailed on. It was a turning point. Maurice began to contemplate the end. Would it be kinder to let the ocean take him? June came, and with it, another storm. Waves towered high, crashing down with fury. The storm lasted for days, leaving them cold, hungry, and exhausted. On June 5th, a massive wave nearly took Maurice's life. He was thrown into the sea, trapped beneath the dinghy. But somehow, through sheer will, he managed to surface. Together, he and Maralyn fought to pull him back aboard the raft. By late June, their bodies were failing. Maurice was barely conscious, slipping in and out of awareness. On June 30th, 117 days after their boat sank, they fished as usual. Their lives had settled into a strange routine, defined by survival and the relentless passage of time. Then Maralyn saw it, a ship on the horizon. She shook Maurice, barely able to rouse him. "There's a ship." He didn't believe her. How could he? It had been 45 days since they had last seen one. But it was real. They waved their oilskins, too weak to shout. Maurice fell to his knees, certain it would pass them by, like all the others. "Let it go, Maralyn. This is our life now." But this time the ship turned. Slowly it changed course, heading toward them. When the crew lowered ropes and a ladder, they insisted Maurice go first. His arms, spindly and frail, struggled to pull him up, but he made it. Maralyn followed, her legs thin and fragile, but she climbed. On deck, the crew helped them, hosing them down gently, giving them fresh clothes. Sitting close to Maurice, Maralyn found a comb among their belongings. She combed his hair, gently stroking his cheek. The crew watched in silence. The captain stood by, thinking of the strangeness of it all. He realized, as he watched the tender way they cared for each other, that it was this tenderness that had kept them alive. For Maurice and Maralyn, the sea had become their life. And now, as they were being brought back to the world they had left behind, they wondered what awaited them. The sea had changed them. 2 years later, Maurice and Maralyn would complete a 14-month voyage aboard Orlin II, this time with a 5-man crew. By then, their story was known around the world. When Maralyn passed away from cancer in 2002, Maurice wrote to his friend, "Maralyn had a courage that was not easy to come by, but which always endured. Her will was like the thrust of life itself, inexhaustible and as stubborn as the upsurge of spring. Maurice lived on for another 15 years until he passed in 2018. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your time and hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the other great content on our channel. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.